Hello everyone. Today's topic which we will be delving into is the personality theory by Harry Stack Sullivan, which is also called the interpersonal theory of personality. Before delving into the theory of Harry Stack Sullivan, let's talk about a little bit about biography of Sullivan. So Harry Stack Sullivan was born in a small farming town of Norwich, New York on February 21st, 1892. He was the sole surviving child of the parents. His mother was Ella Stack Sullivan and the father was Timothy Sullivan. Ella Stack Sullivan actually had given birth to two other sons, but unfortunately, neither of whom lived past the first year. As a preschool child, Sullivan neither had friends nor acquaintances of his own age. After beginning school, he felt like an outsider because mainly he was an Irish Catholic boy in a Protestant community. His thick Irish accent and quick mindedness actually made him unpopular with his classmates throughout his years of schooling in Smyrna. This incident, which I'm going to talk about next, is actually very important and has left quite a remark on Sullivan's life. So, when Sullivan was 8.5 years old, he formed a close friendship with a 13-year-old boy whose name was Clarence Bellinger. They had much in common socially and intellectually. Both were considered socially retarded but advanced intellectually. Both later became psychiatrists and neither of them married. The relationship between Harry and Clarence had a transforming effect on Sullivan's life. It is said that it awakened in him the power of intimacy. That is the ability to love another being who was more or less like himself. In Sullivan's mature theory of personality, he placed a heavy emphasis on the therapeutic, almost magical power of an intimate relationship during pre-adolescent years. In Sullivan's case, which I would like to add, that his sexual orientation may have prevented him from gaining the acceptance and recognition he might have had if others had not suspected of his homosexual orientation. In the American society, actually, at that point of time, during Sullivan's time, actually, the mental health workers found it very difficult to admit their indebtedness to a psychiatrist whose homosexuality was commonly known. Also, homosexuality being a sin in the community was very prevalent. So, Sullivan could have achieved a greater fame, but unfortunately was shackled by sexual prejudices that kept him from being regarded as America's foremost psychiatrist of the first half of the 20th century. So this was a bias against him. And as psychology students, people in the field, we must understand that this field also had its own evils at certain points of time. Moving on to the interpersonal theory, here I'm just going to talk about in a small gist that according to Sullivan, he believed that people develop their personality within social context, which is the environment the person is living in. He emphasized the importance of various developmental stages, which was the infancy, childhood, the juvenile era, pre, early, late adolescence, and the adulthood. Um, he said that healthy human development rests on the person's ability to establish intimacy with the other person. But something which interferes with this ability is the anxiety. And anxiety can interfere with satisfying interpersonal relationships at any age. According to him, the most important stage of development is pre-adolescence. You will see that he has emphasized this continuously throughout his theory that the most important stage of development is pre-adolescence. To understand how this interpersonal relationship affects a human being, he started working with the schizophrenics and then he later moved to patients of an obsessive kind. Something interesting which I would like to add is that his residence in New York, when he was doing his personal practice in New York, brought him into contact with several other psychiatrists, mainly European psychiatrists like Karen Horney, Eric Fromm, and with them, along with Clara Thompson, they formed the Zodiac group where they discussed old and new ideas in psychiatry. Now, coming to the theory, there are certain concepts which we must learn before moving on with Sullivan's main theory, which is the developmental stages, which you will see in some time. Before that, let's clarify a few of the concepts. So he talked about tension. Now, what is tension? Tension is the potentiality for action. Potentiality for action that may or may not be experienced in awareness, which means either it can be unconscious or conscious. Sullivan recognized two types of tension, which are needs and anxiety. Needs are tensions brought on by the biological imbalance between a person and its physiochemical environment, which is both external and internal. Now, needs are episodic. Episodic. What does this mean? It means that once it is satisfied, they temporarily lose their power, but after some time it can again reoccur. Like hunger. When we are hungry, it's episodic, we eat and it's gone. And then again we might be hungry again in 2-3 hours. So that is needs. Sullivan says that the most basic interpersonal need is tenderness. An infant develops a need to receive tenderness from its primary caretaker. For example, when the infants need to receive tenderness, usually the infant only receives but never gives tenderness. The responsibility to give tenderness is basically of the primary caretaker to the infant. Let me write that. So when the infant wants tenderness, it may express it by crying, smiling, cooing, and when the mother needs to give tenderness, it is satisfied through the use of infant's mouth and mother's hand. So the mother might pat the baby if it's crying. The mother might feed the baby with her hands. Now, needs can be of two types mainly. That is general needs, and then we have the zonal needs. Now, what happens in the general needs? Our general needs are like oxygen, food, water, and zonal needs arise from particular areas of the body. Particular areas of the body. Now, different zonal needs can also able to reduce the general needs and the zonal needs both. For example, like the mouth is a zonal area, but it satisfies general needs by taking in food and oxygen, and also satisfies zonal needs for other oral activities. Other oral activities, what kind? Like babies put uh, toys in the mouth, or whatever they see, they want to feel it, they put it in the mouth. That is an oral activity, and putting things in the mouth actually gives them pleasure. So that's a zonal need and an oral activity. Food, oxygen, water, these are general needs. Needs are usually productive in nature. The needs lead to some productivity, some productive action, whereas the other need, which is the anxiety, leads to non-productive needs. Leads to non-productive behaviors. Non-productive. Now let's see what is anxiety. What basically Sullivan is trying to say anxiety is. Anxiety, he says, is the disruptive force blocking the development of healthy interpersonal relationship. Now, needs is a type of tension which helps in building interpersonal relationship, because when the baby is wanting tenderness from the mother, and the mother is providing it, mother or anybody in the mothering role is providing it, there's a relationship forming. But what anxiety does is that it is interfering in the healthy development of interpersonal relationships. So Sullivan talks about how actually the anxiety develops or originates in a person. Sullivan said that it is transferred from parent to the infant through the process of empathy. Now you might be very confused. How is empathy leading to anxiety? It is said that anxiety in the mothering one inevitably induces anxiety in the infant. How? Because all mothers or anybody in the mothering role may have some amount of anxiety that is normal while caring for the babies. All infants will become anxious to some degree. It makes people incapable of learning, it impairs memory, it narrows perception, and may also result in complete amnesia. That is what it is saying extreme anxiety can do. Sullivan says that the which two things which are completely undesirable are anxiety and loneliness. Because anxiety is very painful, people have the natural tendency to avoid it and inherently preferring a state of euphoria, which is a complete lack of tension. To reduce, people want to be in euphoria. Now, we know that it cannot be possible. A person cannot be euphoric all the time, and it is also not possible that a person's life is completely lack of anxiety or tension. Now, what is energy transformations? The small thing here. Tensions that are transformed into actions are either covert or overt, are called energy transformations. That is it. Tensions that are transformed into actions. There is a transformation of energy, needs help in forming interpersonal bond. Anxiety disrupts that bond. Now, any kind of tension which is turning into any kind of action, that is your energy transformation. Now, it could be either overt or covert. People might know that there are obvious actions which would be overt, but it could be in the form of emotions, thoughts, which could be covert. Emotions, thoughts, these are covert in nature. Now, moving on to the next slide, we will talk about dynamisms. So, we talked about energy transformations. Now, energy transformations become organized as a typical behavior pattern when your tensions are becoming into actions, and those repeated actions become a behavior pattern which characterize a person's entire life. So, Sullivan called these behavior patterns dynamisms. Dynamisms is nothing but behavior patterns. Now, these could also be traits or habits of a person. There are mainly three which he's talking about. The first one is malevolence. It is equal to evil or hatred. What is it exactly? It is disjunctive dynamism of evil and hatred, characterized by feeling of living among one's enemy, like everybody is my enemy. It usually originates around the age of 2 or 3 years, when children's action that are earlier had brought up maternal tenderness are met with anxiety and pain. Basically, tenderness. So basically what is happening is that the child performs certain actions. Till the age of 1.5 to even 2 years, the actions are getting maternal tenderness. But the same actions when the child is doing at the age of 2 or 3 years old, they are not being faced with maternal tenderness, but in fact they are actually ignored and not given much attention to, which is leading to anxiety and pain. So when parents attempt to control their children's behavior by physical pain or reproving remarks, and instead of maternal tenderness which the child is seeking, he is faced with physical pain. It could be beating or certain remarks which the child does not like, or the child was not seeking these, was seeking tenderness but did not get so. What happens? Some children will learn to withhold any expression of the need of tenderness by protecting them of adopting malevolent attitude. What is happening? Let's see. Child seeks tenderness, does not get it. Like till the age of 1.5 years old, if the child is crying a lot, the person in the mothering role might come and try to pat the child or try to make him calm. But at the age of 2.5, 3 years old, when the child is crying very loudly, he is not getting that pat on the back, or he's not getting that love, but instead he is getting beatings or remarks which he's not liking, does not get it. what the child is doing, that the child now is withholding any expression of the need for tenderness. He's completely withholding it. And then what parents and peers find it even more difficult to actually work with the child, which is again, it's a cycle. It is a vicious cycle. It again solidifies the child's negative attitude towards the world. So again, parents are trying to coax the child into talking with them or wanting to talk with the child about his attitude, but the child is protecting himself by being even more malevolent. Now, what kind of actions are these? These are form of timidity, mischievousness, cruelty, and other kinds of asocial or antisocial behavior, which behaviors which are not accepted in the society. He is acting out, as it is said, mainly those externalizing and internalizing behaviors. So this is malevolence. Intimacy grows out of, again, intimacy also grows out of tenderness, but it involves a close interpersonal relationship between two people of equal status. It develops prior to puberty, ideally during pre-adolescence, when it usually exists between two children, each of whom sees the other as a person of equal value. It has to be equal status or equal value. It cannot be between parent and a child because they do not consider themselves to be equal to each other. But when they are adults and see each other as equals, they can form intimacy. Now, intimacy must not be confused with sexual interest or lust. Lust we will be talking about next. It is a tendency to draw out loving reactions from the other person, and thereby it decreases anxiety and loneliness, two extremely painful experiences which we talked about earlier. Coming to lust, lust is an isolating tendency. Now, for lust, even if there is a love object, it's not needed. It requires no other person for its satisfaction. Like in intimacy, there needs to be two people, but in lust, it is an isolating tendency which do not need another person. It manifests as autoerotic behavior, autoerotic with herself or himself. There is no second person, there is no need of second person. Even if the another person is the object of one's lust, there can be a second person who is the object of a person's lust, but lust do not need a second person. It's autoerotic. It is mainly during adolescence. Now, lust is usually it leads to reduction of self-esteem because attempts of lustful activity are not really accepted by the society, or majority of the society. Now, when it's a unconscious, I can say unconscious, subconscious nature of the society not to accept lust. So when such things happen, it increases anxiety and decreases the feelings of self-worth. Now, what is self-system? Self-system is the inclusion of all dynamisms. All dynamisms. Now, basically, self-system is there to reduce anxiety. Nothing else. It's the entire self-system which tells you that there is something which is causing anxiety, so it reduces it. And this is more of an interpersonal situation, because as we saw earlier also that Sullivan said that a personality cannot be formed if there is no society, if there is no social environment. And this is the same. Self-system is there inside the interpersonal situation, and the entire motive of self-system is to let the self-system know that there is something anxiety provoking and to reduce it. All the kind of behaviors there are to reduce anxiety. When the self-system is in danger, people try to defend themselves. Now, when the self-system itself is in danger, people try to defend themselves by using something called security operations. Now, security operations are mainly of two types, that is dissociation. Dissociation includes those impulses and desires and needs that a person refuses to allow into awareness. Some infantile experiences, like a few babies' behavior, they are neither rewarded nor punished. So those experiences simply do not become part of the self-system. These do not become part of the self-system. But They are present in the unconscious and affect the personality. They do not cease to exist, but it continuously influences their personality, again, as I said, on an unconscious level. The second one is the selective inattention. I'll give you an example for selective inattention, which will help you. Like somebody who thinks that he abides by law all the time. He never breaks traffic laws. Is never has crossed a red signal. If he's thinking like that, if he's regarding himself like that, he actually might just forget about the many occasions that he exceeded the speed limit, or the times when he failed to stop at a sign completely. So what is happening, that these selective attention, we provide to certain things in the environment which might trigger us, which we might think are not part of this our personalities. If this is a personality and we do something this, but we do not consider this part of our personality, so we might just give selective attention to this. We do not even consider that we have done this, but we have done this, and this is part of our personality, but we do not consider this to be part of our personality. So that is how we are protecting actually our system, cell system. Moving to personifications. So beginning in infancy and continuing throughout the various developmental stages, people acquire certain images of themselves and others. Images of themselves and others. These images are called personifications. Now, there is a bad mother and good mother personification. So what is happening? So you might have heard in the Melanie Klein's theory of good breast and bad breast. This is something similar like that. So bad mother and good mother. What is happening? So here it is actually the person mothering who is giving the mothering role, is giving the care. He or she might not be the actual mother. So when the nipple belongs to the mother, it could be a bottle also. Nipple or bottle. Whenever the baby is feeling hungry and he is not getting the bottle or the nipple, and essentially the mother is not able to satisfy the hunger needs, so that becomes a bad mother. What is a good mother? Again, after some time, when the child is getting properly fed whenever he wants, and the mother is cooperative with the child, that becomes the good mother. Now these personifications are based on the infant's perception of an either anxious malevolent mother, and other which is the calm tender mother. The anxious malevolent mother is not the bad mother, and the calm tender mother is the good mother. And until the child is reaching an age where language development is happening, these can coexist. During mid-infancy, the child creates certain personifications about himself, which is the bad me, good me, and not me. So again, each of them are related to the evolving conception of me and my body, means the infant and his body. So now the bad me personification is formed from the experiences of punishment and disapproval that infants receive from the mothering one. The part of the infant which is getting disapproval is the bad me. And again, the resulting anxiety is very strong enough to teach infants that they are bad. But it is not so severe to cause the experience to be completely dissociated or selectively inattended. Then if it would have been dissociated and selectively inattended, what would happen? There wouldn't have been a bad me, because it has been dissociated or selectively inattended. It's not part of his consciousness, but the bad me is part of the consciousness here, which is a part where the child is actually getting disapproval from the mothering person. The good me is the personification from infant's experiences with reward and approval. This is the part which the child is getting approval from the mothering one. Now what is not me? These are formed during severe anxiety. However, may cause an infant to form the not me personification and to either dissociate or selectively inattend experiences related to the anxiety. The anxiety is so great that in this case, what is happening is the not me is being selectively inattended, selectively inattended, or dissociation is happening. Not me is not part of consciousness anymore. It becomes the part of unconscious, but it keeps on having an influence on the person. Now, what is eidetic personification? Eidetic personification is an interpersonal relationship, but not with a real person. Now, I said Sullivan did not have a lot of friends. He also has certain eidetic personification. Eidetic personification is basically relations with imaginary friends or traits. Now, why did I say traits? So basically, children create certain imaginary friends with certain traits which he or she would like in that imaginary friend. These certain friends are formed in the imagination in order to protect their self-esteem. Sullivan believed that these imaginary friends may be as significant to the child's development as real playmates. Because when the children is creating imaginary friends, he is creating those friends with the exact traits he would want in a real life friend, and those imaginary friends are acting as the child would want a real friend to act out. So these friends are actually increasing the self-esteem of the child, and these might be as important as real playmates, as Sullivan has said. Moving on to levels of cognition. There are 3 levels of cognition: prototaxic, parataxic, and syntaxic. So levels of cognition are the ways of perceiving, imagining, and conceiving experiences. Now, these all the 3 levels of cognition happen at different ages. The most earliest and most primitive experience of an infant take place at a prototaxic level, which is the most primitive. Because these experiences cannot be communicated with others, they are difficult to describe or define. One way to understand the term is to imagine the earliest subjective experiences of a newborn baby. Now, the neonate might feel hunger and pain. These are prototaxic experiences, like neonates, hunger, and pain. Because these cannot be explained or communicated with the others. They're difficult to describe because it's a child. And these prototaxic experiences result in observable action. Like, if the child is hungry, he will cry. Prototaxic cognition leads to observable action, like crying. It cannot be communicated in words, but it can be resulted in observable actions. Parataxic. So before moving on to parataxic, let me tell you something about prototaxic. Now, prototaxic can happen even in adults. How? Can happen even in adults. So how is that happening? Let me give you an example. Sometimes people say that they tell another person that they just had a very strange sensation, one that they cannot put into words. Now, these strange sensations they cannot put into words. These are momentary sensations or any kind of feelings, images, moods, and impressions. Now, these primitive image of dream or waking life, they're not completely unconscious. They're not completely unconscious. They're somewhat in subconscious, preconscious level in between, and it's strange. Again, they cannot explain what it was to the other person. They might understand what it was, but they are not able to explain it to the other person. So these are the prototaxic experiences at a adult level. Parataxic experiences are usually when the person assumes there is a cause and effect relationship between two events which occur coincidentally. Like if a child is that occur coincidentally, like if a child is always saying please for candy, and the child has learned this behavior of saying please for a candy. Now the word please itself is not giving the child a candy. There is somebody, a person who has to dispense the candy to the person, to the child. Now when such a person, such a child might grow up, they might ask God or imaginary people to grant favors. Now a good bit of the adult behavior which we project comes from paradoxic thinking. Now again, paradoxic thinking is not something, it's definitely clearly more clearer than prototaxic, but this is also something, um, it's a kind of illogical belief that a cause and effect relationship exists, but actually does not, between two events, but actually does not. It's just that they are so much in close temporal proximity that people tend to believe that it's a cause and effect relationship. Now, moving on to the syntaxic level. Syntaxic level is when experiences are consensually validated, and that can be symbolically communicated. Now, what does consensually validated mean? Consensually validated. Now, suppose I say the laptop. I say the definition of laptop. If I say the definition of laptop, I might say that it's an electronic device which helps me to do online work. Now, two, three, or thousands of people might consensually validate this certain definition. So that's a syntactic level. Like when we wave hand, it's usually in many cultures saying bye bye to the person. So that is a syntactic level communication when the gesture is not personal but consensually validated between two to three other people also understand that kind of behavior gesture. That is syntactic level. And the most common being the language we everyday use. If I'm using a language you are not able to understand, that's not syntactic. If I'm using a language only I understand, that's not syntactic. If I'm using a language I'm including words and gestures which you understand and everybody else understands, at least most of the population understand, that's a syntactic level. And syntactic level usually comes in the child as they develop non-verbal communication. That is how syntactic, till then syntactic level comes into play. Next, moving on to the developmental stages. Starting off with infancy. In infancy, infancy, it is usually till the age of 18 to 24 months, which is 1.5 years to 2 years. And Sullivan believed that the infant becomes a human through the tenderness he is receiving from the mothering person, the person at the mothering role. So the mothering role is very important, and tenderness, he's giving tenderness, which is changing infancy to human. Now again, uh, as we have learned before also, the linkage between the mother and the infant knowingly unknowingly leads to development of anxiety even for the baby. And the anxiety might lead from spring from uh, different kinds of experiences. And the important learnings is the good mother and the bad mother, and the good and the bad me. Because when the nipple is there for the baby to have his food or her food, it is a good mother, and when the nipple is not there, then it's a bad mother. The accepted parts of the infant becomes the good me, and the parts which he finds disapproval is the bad me. Two major things which you have to know that protects the baby from death is apathy and somnolent detachment. Uh, so basically, apathy and somnolent detachment, what it does is that it's a built-in protection of the baby. And even when the child is not getting appropriate care, tenderness, as Sullivan said, this will help the child from death. Like even in hunger, the child may fall asleep because of these two certain things: apathy and somnolent detachment. Another thing during mid-infancy is the autistic language. Basically, it's a private language which makes little to no sense to other people, and the early communication usually takes place in the form of facial expression and sounding of certain phonemes. The childhood stage, the age range is again from 18 to 24 months to about 5 to 6 years. During this stage, the mother remains the most significant other person, but her role is different from what it was in infancy. The dual personification of mother are now fused into one. Dual personification means the good and the bad mother. Here, what happens is infused into one, and the child's view is that the mother is more congruent now. It's not separated into good me or bad me, but sorry, good me, a good mother or the bad mother, but it's a congruent mother that can have both kinds of traits. In addition to combining the mother personification, the child differentiates various persons who previously formed the concept of the mothering role, separating mother and father and seeing as having a distinct role. Now, previously, if the father is feeding the child with the bottle or the mother is feeding the child with the bottle, both essentially remains the mothering role. Both essentially is fulfilling the mothering role. But as the child goes into the stage of childhood, he or she is separating the mother and the father and seeing them having distinct role. That's why it's the parent. The significant others here is the parent. And another important thing is the imaginary playmate. So besides their parents, preschool aged children often have other significant relationships as well, which is an imaginary playmate. This is the eidetic friend. Now they might talk with the friend. They might ask their parents to save a seat for the friend, or even they they see the eidetic friend as a real friend. So, and many adults also recall uh, their experiences as a child having imaginary playmates. And Sullivan says that a lot of there is a lot of notion that having eidetic friends or imaginary friends is not a good sign, and this, but he says that it's very safe and it's not a sign of instability or pathology, but it's a positive event which helps children be ready for intimacy with real friends during the pre-adolescent stage, which he says that the pre-adolescent stage is the most important stage because that's where the child is learning intimacy. See, the most important stage. This the imaginary playmates help the child to have real playmates in real world. And nowadays, if you tell or ask doctors, psychotherapists, people in the field that my child is talking to an imaginary friend, this would be considered a very normal activity in their age group. During the juvenile era, the most important is they see the other playmates as of equal status. They learn, they competition is found among children of the same age group, and they learn how to compromise, cooperate during this period, which is the juvenile era. Now, as again Sullivan says, pre-adolescent being the very important uh, age group because the child is learning intimacy with a single person, a very close person. In the early adolescence, moving on to the early adolescence is the beginning of puberty. It's important because early adolescence is 13 to 15 years old, and it's the beginning of puberty, and uh, it is the period which where there is a need for sexual love with only one person. It is marked by eruption of genital interest and advent of lustful relationships. Majorly in United States, it's seen that early adolescence is generally parallel with the middle school years. Even so, in other countries also almost as well. The need for intimacy achieved during preceding stage continues during these stages as well. Now there might be several friends, but the sexual love is with one person. They learn the balance of lust. Like too many, there should not be too many people with, um, for the child, that too many people with having lust for too many people, or there is creation of intimacy with a single person, which is a sexual love with a single person, and the development of security. So late adolescence, coming to the last stage, it's the discovery of the self and the world outside self. That to understand there is a world which does not really just revolve around them, but there's a world where there are certain different things, and they learn certain different things. So successful late adolescence actually includes growing syntaxic mode. Um, when they go to college or workplace or for higher education, they begin exchanging ideas with others and having their opinions and beliefs either it is validated or repudiated, either accepted into the world or not accepted into the world. And people, uh, they have learned to accept when their ideas are not accepted, because as we have learned through the previous good me bad me, they have learned that if their ideas are not accepted, that they are okay with it. They are learning from others to live in an adult world, and then through this there is a successful journey. If there is a successful journey from for all these stages, then a person can adjust to the real world. Successful journey through all stages leads to proper adjustment in the world. So this was Sullivan's theory, and I hope you have understood. If you want the materials and notes, I would email them to you. If anybody needs, they can leave a comment down below. Thank you.